Welcome everyone. So we're here today with Jenny Lynn McNutt's class, graduate painting class?
Yes.
From New York Studio School?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Welcome, welcome,
Great.
welcome. Here we are at Guerra Paint, home of the original paint component system, which Art Guerra founded in 1986. Technically it was 1985, but he didn't realize he needed a business license until a year later when the city came in and said, hello. And he's like, oh, really? So technically it became a business in 1986, right, Jenny? You can believe that. Art, such character. God, we miss him. Passed away last May. But we're here to keep going and bring the mission onward to the people. Art wanted to give a gift to artists, and the gift was color. He wanted to give artists opportunity to use pigments and materials that they didn't have an opportunity to use at the time. So the basic idea, and the thing that the whole business revolves around, the paint component system, is the pigment dispersion, which this wall is a chart of all of our pigment dispersions. What is a pigment dispersion? A pigment dispersion is a liquid pigment concentrate. They come in gallons from the warehouse, and then we fill them into little bottles. So these are liquid pigment concentrates. This has no binder in it. You cannot use this as a paint. I mean, some people use it straight onto paper. If you have an absorbent paper, it'll go in there. Maybe you could use a spray fix. That's okay. You can do that. You can water it down and use it that way. But it's better if you actually add it to a binder. So, i.e., that's the idea of the paint component system. We give you the components that are part of a pre-made paint, but you then have to mix it together yourself. And the idea there is that you then have greater control over your paint. So a pigment dispersion starts with a dry pigment. All pigments come in a dry form like this. This is an ultramarine. And all pigments have different properties, and they visually look different. This one you can see is more clumpy. This is called an inorganic pigment. Actually, these are both inorganic pigments. I'll get into pigment classes in a minute, but I just sort of want to give you a visual that all dry pigments look a little bit different. And it doesn't have to do with how finely ground they are. That is the grinding is part of the process that makes a pigment dispersion. Dry pigments aren't ground and then sold as dry pigments. Dry pigments are sold as they come from the manufacturers, and the manufacturers are big chemical companies like BASF, Shepherd. Art material companies don't make pigments. Most pigments are made in manufacturing companies. It's a very technical process. Some pigments do come straight from the earth. Those are called the earth pigments. So we've got basically three general classes of pigments up here on this wall. We've got the inorganic, which is these two pigments here, which are cadmiums, cobalts, ultramarines, chromiums, things that basically have metal in them usually. Then we've got the organic pigments, and as Art used to always say, organic doesn't mean brown rice. Organic means organic chemistry. I just need a glass of water. Organic pigments are bound with a carbon atom. And visually, the difference between organics and inorganics is that inorganics tend to be more opaque, heavier, and you can understand why that would be because there's metal in there. And then when you go to mix with them, you get earthier mixes. The organic colors are like, phthalates, everything up here that has a sort of a longer, fancier name. The quinacridones, the benzimidazolones, naphthols, that's not so fancy, pyranthrone, but you get my meaning. So, and those tend to be more transparent, although there are some medium opacity ones as well. And then we've got the earth colors, which are sort of down here. And some of those are iron oxides, which also are basically manufactured. Some of those are actual earth colors that come straight out of the earth, mineral veins. And that would be green earth is a good example of that. There used to be mineral veins in the United States, but those have all dried up. So now, basically, mostly Italy, Germany, they still have really good mineral veins. Let's see, I wanted to go back to, you know what, before I start talking too much, I want to just actually get my hand in a little bit of paint here to keep you guys enthused. So let's just show you how the paint component system works, because you can understand it more when you get a visual, and then we'll keep going on the technical stuff.
So why the mineral veins have dried up, or they're no longer? Is it because of usage, or is
usage?
it
Yeah, I guess so. I just got all picked clean.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah, I know that they just don't mine anymore here. It's all Italy and Germany.
Wow, because those countries have been occupied by, you know, heavily populated for so much longer.
I know. I think there's just more there. We still have in our collection a lot of earth colors that came from Pennsylvania. But yeah, as far as I know, they don't mine pigments there anymore.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, so the paint component system, the way it works is it's pigment dispersion plus binder equals paint. So I'm going to get my pigment dispersion. I'm going to get a binder, i.e. medium, binder, medium, interchangeable term. I'm going to take my gloves. Always be cautious and careful. We like to say all artist materials are chemicals. Be cautious and careful. Everything we sell is like low on the hazard level.
Good. We're good. We're cool.
But
Don't look at me. I'm not.
you know, it's always good to be protective. Okay, so
and this opposite of your word.
start with the binder. This is we're calling this stand 6. So there's a raw material shortage going on right now. Actually, it's a crisis. And we haven't been able to get our usual standard acrylic since April of last year. There was, I don't know if anybody remembers, there was a freeze in Texas last year. And interestingly enough, all of these big machines called crackers broke. Now these crackers turn petroleum, which we all know there's a lot of oil in Texas, but they turn petroleum into monomers and polymers to make resins. They all broke. And they, I believe, only just recently got back online, but there's probably all this testing that has to be done. So long story short is we have not been able to get this resin we're used to getting for over a year. We've gotten this one as a replacement. It's pretty good. We like it. It actually looks almost identical to this one, which is what we're used to using. So this is called Stand 6. I'm going to start with the binder. It's pretty fluid. It's a real fluid acrylic. So this is how you determine how much paint you want to make. Then we've got our pigment dispersion, which used to be a dry pigment. I should have the red one, but it's okay, you get the idea. So all pigments come in a dry form. And then it needs to get ground in a mill. We have this mill in the warehouse where my husband, Jody, does all the grinding of the pigments into these liquid concentrates. And it gets ground with this stuff, which is called dispersed water. This is a surfactant. This is something that is actually in all paint. It's like an industrial detergent. And what this does is it cleans pigment particles and helps them to separate from each other, because all pigment particles come in what are called aggregates, which are like these little magnetically charged lumps. So even though visually we only see the aggregates here and not so much, especially here, phthalos happen to be a very fine kind of powder, these are still in aggregates and have to be ground and separated. And this is a good example of why that has to happen. So here is a version, 2 different versions, of dry pigment versus ground pigment. This is indanthrone blue-red. This is like a deep indigo pigment. It's a very fine looking pigment, like, you know, fine size-wise. It kind of looks like this. But once you paint it out, if you look up this up close, and I'll pass this around, you still see teeny little pigment particles because it hasn't been ground. Once it's ground properly in a 3-ball mill, which is what we use, it's a ceramic ball mill. And on our Instagram, there's all kinds of visuals of that and Jody emptying the mill. A ceramic ball mill is this huge piece of equipment. It's like 2,500 pounds. My husband is massive. You have to be like super strong to manipulate it. And this is why no one does it this way anymore, because it's really, really difficult. Now they make pigment dispersions with high-speed mixers, which is just this big blade that spins and spins and spins. But it doesn't bring the pigment to as fine a grind as we are used to, which is called a Hegman 8. It's an 8 grind. And the best grind gives you the best color. So we stick by the old-fashioned way. We've got this ceramic ball mill. It's ceramic lined, and then it's got sort of like this. This is a texture we sell, but it's got these little pebbles in it, ceramic balls. And it spins and spins and spins. The dry pigment goes in there. All pigments have different requirements. They have different formulas for the dispersion. But the dry powder basically goes in there with some of this stuff, the surfactant, which we call dispersed water off the shelf, water, and some propylene glycol, which is a general drying time retardant, but it helps wet out particles and helps them to separate from each other. So this is an example of the difference between a dry and a ground. So you see how the ground version, it gets so much more brilliant. It really, once those pigment particles are fully separated from each other, it releases the color and the intensity and the way that pigment is actually supposed to look. It helps it to achieve its full potential. So that's a good sample, this indanthrone. And then this one, also, quinacridone gold. Look at that difference. This is dry, and this is the dispersed one. It brings out the transparency of the color. You can't see the little pigment particles anymore, and it brings out just the vibrancy. So if you guys want to pass those. Oh, this is quinacridone gold, if I didn't already say that. This is an extinct pigment. We have a wide collection. We're pigment collectors. Art was a pigment collector. And he was always calling companies. That's how he started the business. That's how he learned how to make dispersions, was he started just calling companies endlessly and picked their brains. And we joked that he was the start of the 1-800 number because he drove people crazy. But he learned how to do this stuff, which is quite scientific. As I mentioned, each dispersion has its own formula that's required, different percentages. And he just figured out how to do all this. And then my husband has been tweaking things for 20 years, and we've been talking to chemists and la 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 la. But yes, so quinacridone gold is one of our extinct pigments. We have a wide range of extinct pigments. What does that mean? Well, I told you that artist companies don't make pigments. Large chemical manufacturers make pigments. And pigments are not made for artists. I think we're like 1% of the users of color in the market. Most color is manufactured for automotive, toys, plastics. There's all kinds of big markets out there. Artists are a tiny portion. So, yes, Jen?
Seren, I'm trying to understand this radical difference.
I know, isn't that crazy?
In those two colors there. And in the one where it's been ground, is it because it's only because the particles have been made ever smaller, and so light can get in there and it reflects light differently?
The particles are not getting smaller, they're getting separated from each other. It's all about surface area. Yeah, so all the particles are magnetically charged and stuck together, and the whole grinding process is about separating the particles from each other. So their surface area is laying the way it's supposed to and reflecting the light the way it's supposed to.
Just like porcelain.
Yeah.
When the particles get separated, all those tiny particles. That's why it's so incredibly white and dazzled Europeans. Because of the whiteness that Europeans didn't have.
So yes, quinacridone gold was mostly used in the wider marketplace for, I think it was used in automotive also, but it became very popular for violins, actually. And you can picture that, right? This color being on a violin. At a certain point, it just became not cost effective. Most times, chemical companies, they delete the pigments. We call it then extinct. but they just delete pigments because it's just not financially feasible for them anymore for whatever reason. So we have made it our business to collect pigments that are becoming extinct whenever we hear about it. So yeah, Art really developed a lot of connections back in the day. Most of those are gone. A lot of these smaller pigment companies have been eaten up by larger pigment companies, unfortunately. A lot of the selection is therefore gone, but we've done our best to collect as many colors as possible that you can only find here now. And so this is one of those colors, and we still have a lot of this. This is quinacridone gold. It's very beautiful, very transparent, and it makes a gorgeous actual gold. And I'll do a sample of this when we add an aluminum concentrate to it. So, and that's a good way of making a stable gold that's not going to tarnish, because when you make a gold from a bronze powder, which we also have, that can tarnish. Okay. Yes.
When you say you collect them, do you just like keep them in your records, or do you still like?
Oh, we still sell them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So some of the extinct ones, quinacridone gold. All of these nickel azos here. These were really popular in the 70s as a color.
Good. Why would anybody want to get rid of them?
You can't get these anymore. We still have a fair amount. Let's see, what else is extinct? Some of these reds up here are gone.
Oh, the isoindolin?
Isoindolins are gone. Yeah, the anything up here that's a 1 ounce only size means it's extinct, because we can only offer it now in a tiny quantity. And some of them are completely gone. If it says 86 next to it, means we don't have it anymore. So the quinacridone pink. Oh no, we're almost out of the rose matter, but we still have a teensy bit. What else? Some of them are just super rare. This one, okay, this one is not A6, so this one is no longer made, this Indo Blue. But these two indanthrons are very close to it. This benzobenazole R5R is a very interesting pigment. We got a call from a company saying, we have all this surplus pigment, Porsche wanted to use it, but they decided to go with a slightly different color. Do you guys want it? And we bought it sight unseen, because Art was like, yeah, that sounds great. It's a really violet blue, which you can see how, with the paint up here, you can see how violet that is. And this is what it looks, so this funny story, they ordered, Jody and Art ordered this stuff. It arrives in the warehouse in like 8 huge drums. And they opened the drum and it looked like this. And they were like, oh my God, we got screwed. It looks like kitty litter. Oh no. But then, I don't know how we keep planning on doing this, but let's do it. They were like, well, let's see what happens if we add a little dispersed water to it. So add some of this stuff. A little bit of water. Oh, my brushes are terrible, I'm sorry. And as soon as they started wetting it, they saw this beautiful violet coming out. Now, of course, this has to be ground to achieve its full potential, but you can see how it started releasing this violet. Slap them on here. Yeah. So it's really crazy that it went from that sort of greenish, rocky thing to this. And this is a paint out of what it looks like once it's fully ground. Over here is mixed with that metallic I was just telling you about.
Porsche made a big mistake.
They made a big mistake. I know. It's a fabulous color. Yeah. Okay. And that color is called PB80. So up here on this wall, all of these colors have numbers next to them, and those are, remember I told you outside about those color index books that Art discovered that are like pigments and encyclopedias? They listed all of the pigments available at the time and also their color index numbers. So all pigments are assigned color index numbers. So this PB80 means pigment blue 80. Hard to find this one. As far as I know, we might be the only ones that sell this. So as you can see, all these colors have their own numbers, and this is an interesting thing to keep track of, because when you buy a tube of paint and it says hue, it means it's like a cadmium green. There is no such thing as a cadmium green, actually. It doesn't exist. There is no cadmium green pigment. A cadmium green is a hue. It's a mixture of probably, I think it's a Hansa yellow with, I forget which blue. But so that's something to keep in mind. And going back to like Art's frustration originally, which brought him to make this business of colors going gray on him because things were mixed in there. When pigments are mixed, when you're working with a mixture unwittingly, it's gonna get muddy that much quicker on you. So the best way to understand color, work with color, control your color is to work with single pigments. Because all pigments have their own light wave, you know, and as soon as you start crossing them, you get too many light waves in the mix. Which also brings me to, there's a reason why there are so many reds and so few blues, because reds have a light wave that goes like this. So there's a lot of space, color space there, whereas the blues has a light wave like this, and there just isn't as much space. So there's fewer blues, more reds. Lost my train of thought. I'm gonna go back to jumping into the mixing, because I went off topic. Well, I'm still on topic, but I'm flying around, which is what I always do, and that's okay. Okay, so pigment dispersion, made from the dry pigment. You always want to tap this first and give it a good shake, because we don't put any filler in here. We like to keep them pure. We believe in pure. Once you put, like other dispersion companies, and by the way, there are some other dispersion companies, well, and there's big dispersion companies that sell to all the hardware stores and whatnot. But they have a small color selection. We're the only ones that have over 200 colors. In fact, we're the only ones in the world that disperse cadmiums. And we have more cobalts than anybody else too. I think there's a couple companies that do the straight up blue cobalt, but yeah. We have way more cobalts and cadmiums and all these extinct pigments and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so you shake, and then you add a little squirt. It's basically by eye. The labels do have an indication of the tinting strength. Oh, all pigments have properties by nature. Tinting strength, transparency, opacity, alkali resistance, weather fastness, because a pigment can be really stable indoors, but as soon as you take it outdoors and it gets exposed to weather, it can fade on you. So we have these charts that give all those ratings. Let's see. Noelle is actually in the middle of painting new charts, but this gives all that information there. Oh, I need my glasses. Noelle, would you? Could you grab my glasses out of my jacket pocket? Yeah. Oh, I can kind of see. So we've got, yeah, I said the weather fastness, the opacity, the tinting strength, and the blue wool scale. I forgot to mention the light fastness. Thank you. Very important is the light fastness of the color, right? Because we're all artists and we want our stuff to be archival and to be light fast. So we try to only stick to light fast colors. And we give you the full rating, the blue wool scale rating, rather than the ASTM. Because the blue wool scale, the ASTM is one number. You'll find that in all your usual paint tubes. But the blue wool scale gives you 3 numbers. It gives you the full tone, medium tone, light tone. Because sometimes when you add white to a color, it becomes less light fast or more light fast. So these are all things to know about if you care about things being archival. Go back to this, because again, I left it. I keep getting sidetracked. Okay, so I put my pigment dispersion into my binder. I gave it just a little squirt. This happens to be quite a strong pigment. This is Naphthol Vermilion. Naphthols also are pretty opaque. Because remember I told you that pigments have different properties by nature. So some are transparent, some are opaque. This happens to be a very opaque one. So basically I'm at full saturation. You only want to add as much pigment as you need to, because once you hit full saturation, it's not going to get any brighter. and then you're just kind of, you know, wasting pigment. But the one thing it can do and will do is start to matte out the paint, because you're basically, this dries back to a powder, so you're adding a liquid powder to your paint. So as I said, there's no filler in here. Some other dispersion companies put clays in there to keep them suspended. So because we don't do that, yes, they stay pure, but you'll get some settling of the pigment contents, which is why we say you got to tap it and shake it really well before use.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please shoot.
What are the pigments dispersed in?
So they are dispersed in this stuff, surfactant, which we sell as dispersed water. Some people like to work with dry pigments, so then we, you know, encourage them to get this stuff. And then water and some propylene glycol, which is a general drying time retarder that other people sell as retarder. So yeah, and then there's really nothing else, and they're all in different proportions and percentages, and every pigment has different requirements. Okay, so I just added a little squirt, I stirred it up. I'm definitely at full saturation here.
So this store only sells like for acrylics and things like that?
Water-based
Oil?
paint, yeah.
Okay.
So these, because this is not a paint yet, this is just a liquid pigment concentrate, this can now go into any water-based binder.
Okay.
So you can make watercolor, we sell gum arabic, you can make your own watercolors. You can use egg yolk to make egg tempera. We have big customers that do plaster finishes. So this can go straight into plaster, and you can do your big wall finishes. A lot of the anthropology stores are color.
So Seren, just to on this point, you cannot add oil.
Well, they're not made for that, but I have, and these are old charts. We did these ages ago because we had customers coming in telling us, I've been adding this to oil and it seems to work okay. And we're like, well, have at it if it works for you. So we don't say we made them for that. They are water-based dispersions. We manufacture them to be water-based and added to water-based binders, which are the kind of binders we sell. We don't sell anything oil-based anymore. But we did a little chart, and again, this is old and a little dirty, but it shows you all of the pigments mixed into stand oil, the dispersions. Of course, dry pigments can go either way. You can put any dry pigment into any kind of binder. But yeah, other than like a few of the colors kind of failed and got clumpy or separated, but most of them look really good.
And it's just stand oil that those are
Just
mixed in,
straight stand oil.
not
Yep.
linseed.
Pass them around?
Yeah, you want to pass it around here?
They weren't ground. They weren't ground in the oil. They're just.
No, that's
They're
just the
just-
dispersion,
just
which is
dispersed.
pre-ground into stand oil.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, so I want to get back to this and do my thickener. That's thickener 2. So this is part of the.
Linseed, isn't it?
Linseed, and there's another oil in there that retards. Stand oil is very slow drying.
Yeah, stand oil is just thickened linseed oil.
Okay.
Okay, so this is another part of the paint component system. This is called thickener number 1. This is a rheology modifier. So once I add this to this, we're gonna see some magic happen. Oops, I have to unscrew the cap.
So you've already mixed the first emulsion.
Yeah, I took my,
Yeah.
I started with my acrylic, I added my dispersion, my naphthol vermilion until it was fully saturated. And now I'm gonna add my thickener number 1. Give a little squirt. It's about 1 to 3%. And then you go really rapidly in one direction as though you were an electric mixer. Keep it kind of even.
Oh,
This continues to thicken over
Whoa.
like, 30 seconds to a minute. So before you decide to add more, just wait and see where you're at with this. This is pretty good. So you can see that got much thicker.
wow.
Now, because we use high resin binders, that's not going to shrink a lot on you because it isn't, so full of water. It's mostly resin. I'm gonna see you can go too far with this stuff, so you have to be a little bit careful. Once it feels stiff, don't add any more. This still feels a little bit loose, so I'm gonna add a little bit more. The nice thing about using this system is you get to play with your materials and you get to understand your materials better. So our slogan is master your materials, because of course the old masters made their own paint, right? You know, so we make it easy for you to make your own paint. And this way you get more in tune with the paint and therefore more in tune with the painting. At least that's my belief. Okay, that's pretty good.
So what's the thing you added?
That's called thickener number 1. This is a rheology modifier.
You said a rheology?
Rheology, it controls the rheology.
What is
What's
rheology?
rheology?
Oh, it's just like the thickness. I don't know.
Is this what accounts for the 5 variations?
Yeah, I didn't explain that yet, did I? Okay, yeah, let's do that. Well, first I'm gonna add my thickener number 2 to show you. This is a secondary thickener that's gonna make this kind of sticky, sort of like oil paint, kind of like honey. And if you then add water to this, it can be like a tar gel and really drag it around and make strings. Okay, so this makes it like,
Whoa.
yeah.
If you add water, you can make it tar gel.
Oh, okay. I was looking at the sheet.
So this just really
What
changes
is this
like,
left here?
the viscosity of
What?
it. It makes it draggy. It really feels more like oil paint. Okay, I will add a touch of water to that. to
It's
see if
crazy
we
how
can
the
get
water
stringy.
makes it.
What's that?
It's crazy how the water makes it look like oil paint. Is that what
It
you
was the thickener number 2. This is not
Oh,
water.
okay.
This is
Okay,
technically a
thank
thickener for urethane, which is another binder we sell. Urethanes are self-leveling, so they give you like an enamel-like kind of finish, and that's what this was painted with.
So you,
High gloss, yeah.
Did you have a question?
well, I was just gonna say, do you have to add thickener number 2 after 1, or can you go straight to 2? Like,
Only with the urethane, you could go straight to 2. With the acrylic, if you go straight to 2, it can be kind of cheesy. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so you can see how I added a little bit of water to that, and now I can really pull it around and make this like stringy tar jelly stuff.
You guys have Eve's Klein Blue. That's really funny.
Yes, so basically Yves Klein Blue is a particular kind of ultramarine. We don't have the exact one, but
It's waste.
there are quite a few ultramarines. There's R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, R6. R8 is now extinct. We still have some. So the R's mean, so R8 would be the warmest, so it's 8 degrees towards red. R2 is the coolest. That's the one we use for ultramarine medium, and that is 2 degrees towards red. So it's the greenish shade, ultramarine.
So it's not actually Eve's Klein Blue. It's just like.
Yeah, I think, Yves Klein maybe had a patent on a particular
Yeah,
ultramarine. Yeah, but you can come real close.
That's what I was curious
The
about. Was
ultramarine
do you have the actual like
Yeah, so I think it says,
patent like the
above here it says,
kind of
sort of Yves
Yeah.
Klein Blue.
That's funny.
Okay, so that's that. Oops, I'm making a mess. And yes, you make a mess doing this stuff. Okay, I was going to talk about, let me wipe off my brush and put it in water.
What's the cobalt blue medium made of?
Cobalt pigment.
Oh, well, so what does medium mean again?
Oh, that's sort of like, well, we have cobalt blue dark, so the medium would be sort of,
Oh, I see.
straight up, middle of the road, mid shade, yeah.
Okay.
so to this paint, you added the first. You added the dispersion.
This one?
Yeah.
This one, you always start with your binder,
Oh,
i.e.
the
medium. So,
binder.
and you don't have to use one of ours. You can use some other brand of medium
Right.
and just add our color straight to it.
And then you added thinner one.
Yes, and the binder is what's going to determine your surface sheen. So we have matte binders. We have one called Silica Flat that our color charts, the small color charts are painted with.
Okay.
We have glossy ones. This is all glossy. That determines the surface sheen. What determines the transparency or opacity of the pigment is the pigment itself. Because remember, that's one property that pigments have.
So is silica the main binder? Is that the main?
Silica
Item.
is our main matte binder. Well, I mean, we have urethane flat too, which is also very beautiful. But silica flat is like an acrylic wash. It's what, let me take these gloves off for a second. this chart. I'll pull this out of here so you can pass that around. This is the silica flat binder. So if I were to take one of these dispersions and mix it into my silica flat binder, it's going to look like that as opposed to this, which is the glossy acrylic. If I were to take my dispersion and add it to this urethane 32, I'm going to get this no brushes, oopsie, no brush stroke, really smooth enamel-like surface. Acrylics more want to hold a brush stroke. So it all depends, your surface depends on what binder you use, your transparency opacity depends on what pigment dispersion you're using, and your saturation depends on how much of the pigment dispersion you're using. And to me, that is the best thing about this system, is you are controlling the saturation. When you have a pre-made paint that has a predetermined amount of pigment in it, so that's as bright as it's going to get, you get to bump it up with this system. You get to add as much color as you want, or as little. Okay, so the chart, that's what I was going to talk about. I didn't describe that.